This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
Here's your report.
Oh, thanks, Jane. I wish I could hire someone just like you.
Try LinkedIn Hiring Pro. It's more than a job board. It's like the recruiter you always wished you had. Hiring Pro uses real-time insights to match your role to LinkedIn's unique network of professionals and delivers a short list of best fit candidates. You'll spend less time sorting applicants and more time talking to the right people.
Let's do it. You're irreplaceable, Jane, but another you would be great.
Hire right the first time. Post your job for free on LinkedIn today at linkedin.com/quality.
So you're thinking of starting dating again. What are the things that when we start dating, we need to consider again if you've been, especially out of dating for a long time? Maybe you've had a long period of time on your own and you've just met someone or you're thinking of asking someone out again. What are the kind of things that actually go through your mind that you need to consider maybe when you start dating? Well, the first one that I've found is first thing you have to do is learn not to be so selfish again. Because when you're single, the lovely thing about being single is you can be completely selfish and not have to apologize for it. You can do exactly what you want, when you want, with having to make an explanation or tell someone where you are, or if you're going to be late, or you can't do that, or you can't do this, because you're now then suddenly considering someone else in your life. And that's usually one of the first things that I find is that if there's going to be a chance with someone I'm dating, it's whether or not I actually want to do that. Because when you have to start thinking about it, that usually says to me that it's probably not the right person anyway. Because I think if you meet someone that you want to be with, you'll naturally just give up your time. And I also think that about people that I'm dating, if I find if they're not really finding time for me, I jump to the conclusion quite quickly that probably I'm not right for them anyway, which is fine. We spoke about this in the podcast before. You know, you're not going to be for everyone. It's not a personal thing. It's about them finding the right person for themselves. But if you're having to make an effort to actually consider that, and it's too much of an effort, I think that will tell you more about what you're actually feeling about that person in that moment. And that might change. You might grow to be more considerate of your time and start to give them more time. But that's one of the big things for me that I find when I start entering into a relationship. I need to be conscious of it because my default is usually being single and doing what I want to do without an explanation or a thought for someone else. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is just letting yourself actually be vulnerable again. Because to be single on your own is very different to being single and dating. Being single and going, I'm not dating anymore. I've had enough of dating. I completely get that. And I know many of you out there that send me comments all the time. You're done with dating. You're like, I've had enough of it. Guys are creeps, women are mad, whatever it may be, and I'm just not doing it anymore. You've given up on the dating scene. It's like a no. Some of you are very open to it and are like, do you know what? I'm happy on my own. I'm good in my space. But if something comes along or someone comes along that I want to gamble this on, then I'm happy to pursue that. And that's what it is. It is always a gamble because when you enter into dating and start dating someone, you're putting your peaceful life, let's say, on the line to make it chaotic again. And it can be chaos. And I don't say chaos in a bad way. I quite like a little bit of chaos in my life, and what I mean by chaos is things happening. One person's chaos is another person's calm. And I've just made that up. It's, I like a little bit of noise and I like something going on. If things are too peaceful and too quiet and too orderly, I get bored. So for me, I quite like that, but it is always a gamble because it can upset your equilibrium of where you are, your balance in life. Where when you're single, you've got your routine. Us single people, when we're single, that you have a routine of you do this, you do that, and that's what keeps you going each day. Is you've got your routine, you're set, you're happy, you're comfortable, you're in your comfort zone. When you start dating, you have to come out of that comfort zone. And in order to do that, you need to be quite brave because you're putting your heart out there again for someone to take in or someone to throw away sometimes. And obviously you don't, do this all the time, hopefully. I did a few times where you just throw yourself into it straight away. And you do get better at that and being a little bit more measured. But sometimes when you meet people that you're really taken by, it's hard not to be excited. You want to be excited by it. So you do get carried away sometimes. You do get, carried away with thinking, God, we could do this and we could do that. And you might have only been out twice. So when you look at it in the cold light of day, you've actually known the person for 3 hours and there you are planning the next 15 years of your life. But in order to, you know, put yourself out again, you have got to be really brave because you're putting everything your life that you've got, and especially when kids are involved as well. I think people with young kids, and I had this, with Zach a lot of the time. You've got a lot more to consider than just yourself. When it's just you, it's quite easy because it's like, well, I can go out if it doesn't work out. I'll just slip back into my life again. But with kids, there's always an extra consideration of, well, when do I introduce them to this person? And how do I introduce them? It becomes even more complex when you've got an ex-partner that you're thinking, right, okay, so do I need to tell them when I'm going to introduce them? Or are they at an age now where, I don't have to worry about that? I know with Zach, there was very few people I actually introduced him to because I always felt that I needed to be with them for sort of 2 or 3 months before I did that when he was younger. When he's older, kids know you're going to date because they're doing it themselves, but when they're younger, you're mindful of two things when they're younger. You're mindful of one, bringing people into their life, and you're mindful of that kids don't keep secrets from their other parents, and you can't ask them to. So you also know that they're going to go back and say, "Oh, I met Daddy's new friend," or "I met Mummy's new man," and and that can just cause you grief that you really don't need sometimes. So there's a lot more consideration. So it's all those fears of what you bought from your past and also what you've got in your present that you have to consider when you start dating. And sometimes the easiest choice is to go, it's too much hassle for for what I'm risking and for what I'm getting out of it. It's just too much hassle. Others, and I'm one of those, would always do it because I just think I like doing it. In terms of I'd like to find someone, or you hope you find someone that can be that person. And there are times when you go, I've had enough for now. But I never got to the stage where I thought, I'm done with this. I got to the stage where I thought, if I don't meet anyone, I'm going to be absolutely fine. But I never got to the stage where I gave up on it. And that goes back to what we spoke about last week, I think, in the podcast, which was being brought up on all the rom-coms where, you're always looking for your happy ending. And why shouldn't you? We all deserve that. And when things are right and things are good in a relationship, it's great. And I think you look at people that have been together for a long time. And also for me now, in my life with, me and Zach, I want other people around for him as well, and whether that person's got kids or whatever it may be. Because, like I said, that goes back to I like that little bit of chaos. I like at Christmas, like loads of people around, and it's a very social thing. And when there's just two of you, you don't have that dynamic. Yes, you've got family coming in, but they've got their lives as well. So it's nice sometimes to have your own unit where there's other stuff going on for other people in your life as well. So it's not just always about you having someone. It's about, enriching other people's lives as well, as long as it's the right person. And then we start to get to, you know, when we're meeting people in those early days and we start to get to.
This summer, say I do.
I am marrying a stranger.
Like never before.
Am I crazy?
It's a whole new Married at First Sight on Peacock.
Thank God I woke up in love.
With new experts.
My name is Dr. Lisa.
My name's Paul Brunson.
More couples.
This could be the start of a very successful marriage.
And more surprises.
Or maybe not.
Everything is just not enough.
You're a little bit crazy.
I don't know what's gonna happen. I want my fairy tale ending.
Married at First Sight, now streaming. New episodes Thursdays, only on Peacock.
If you've ever blasted synth beats from your boombox or burned CDs for your besties, this one's for you. As people get older, much like their music tastes, their health needs change. AG1 is the simple daily health drink designed to deliver over 75 essential daily nutrients and pre- and probiotics to support energy, digestion, and mood, so you can make the most out of every decade and dance break. Learn more at drinkag1.com.
What is called the red flags. Not a great lover of the terminology, I'm going to be honest. It's not really about them. It's actually more about us. We think we're seeing traits of that in this new person when it could just be a moment. We all have moments, I guess, of different traits. I think it only becomes a trait when it's a constant thing, when someone's constantly doing it. But I think in the initial stages, we can put all these obstacles in our way because we're desperately trying to build a wall around ourselves and protect ourselves dating. And I think a lot of people do that with other people as well, where they'll, instead of going, right, I've met this person, I'm going to see where this goes. So, I'm going to spend time with this person knowing I could get hurt, and you get hurt to the amount that you put in. But if things are going well, you slowly put in more. But what some people do, and I think I might have done this myself, I'm not sure, but, is what you'll be doing in that relationship, because you're subconsciously thinking, right, I could get hurt here. You then have something else there as a bit of a cushion, and whether that's keeping them at arm's length or even other people, you're going, okay, well, I like this girl or I like this guy, but I'm going to see this guy and this girl as well, because if they sort of don't want to be with me, I'm going to feel better because I'm seeing this other person anyway. So you're always giving yourself a bit of a safety net for your own well-being, I guess. And that's not necessarily, I realise, a good thing to do. And I think I've been guilty of that before, where I'm thinking, do you know what? You're not going to hurt me, because if you hurt me, actually, I'm going to be fine because I got this person here. And I think that's what happens on dating apps, where people are so used to getting, jolted or hurt or ghosted or whatever, they've always got something else going on so that they can just switch straight away, going, right, I don't care, I'm on to this now. And then they'll do the same now. So it's very hard to get out of that. But I think the first thing is being aware that you may do it, because you're so worried about just focusing on one thing. And if you're focusing on one thing, you could get hurt. And then you realise, well, actually, I've wasted 2 months of my life over there when I could have been investing that in something else. So the next question we're going to get to, on the next topic we're going to get to, is about this red flag. So like I said, I'm not a great lover of some of the terminology that we use in dating, and I think it's generalised a lot of the time. But I also think that we're saying like red flags about things that are just characteristics, And so what I'm going to do, for a little game that you can play on your own, if you're in the car or wherever you're watching, I'm going to go through some things, and I want you to say whether it's a red flag or a characteristic. And you can also do what's a red flag for you and what's not a red flag. So here we go. So the first thing, height, eating with your mouth open, smoking, weight, over or underweight, kids. They've got kids. If they're too quiet, if they're really outgoing, they want to be out all of the time, constantly talking, never having silence, messy, jealous, a bit of a know-it-all, likes a drink, vegan, very opinionated, really shy, overly confident, mothering, very tactile, rude, selfish and independent. So they're just a few things that I wrote down. Some of those you might have gone, yeah, definitely for me. Now, what I mean about a red flag and a characteristic, I think we can get caught up going, let's take a couple of these. So, smoking. For me, it's a definite no, but it's not a red flag. That's just a characteristic of someone. That I don't date people that smoke. That's just me. But I don't think that's a red flag. That's not a what I would call a character trait for me. And it's the same as with kids. If someone's got kids, if go, oh, it's a red flag, they've got kids. Well, it's not a red flag, is it? They've got kids. It's not like that, it doesn't mean that they're a narcissist because they got kids. I'd understand if they got narcissistic tendencies, then that would be a red flag. So red flags for me would be something like eating with your mouth open. Yes, you could say that's a characteristic. For me, I just don't like it. If I see someone doing that, I just don't like it. Rudeness, that's another red flag for me. I think they're sort of they're inbred in that person. If someone's rude, they're not going to change that. They're not going to change that. If someone's got kids, the kids are going to grow up. That's going to be an ever-changing thing. Smoking, someone can give up smoking if they really want to, I think. You know, But if someone's really opinionated, they're always going to be that way. Someone that's going to give their opinion about everything, and that may be really annoying to you. You may see it as that they know a lot, but they just could be a bit of a bloody know-it-all. Like when someone who watches a podcast and then, after 5 minutes of listening to someone talk about dinosaurs, they think they're an expert on dinosaurs. What they're doing is repeating knowledge that they've heard from someone else that may not be right. Selfish, independent, all these things, they could be red flags to one person and characteristics to another. And one person's red flag is another person's green flag, a vegan. Now, to me, I've got nothing against vegans whatsoever. I completely, get it. But I find that when I've dated vegans, I found it very difficult because it's always every time you go out, you need to think about that, and that's selfish. So for me, that for someone else, I would be a red flag. I'm covered in bloody red flags, but yeah, I think we get so caught up in all of this, but it's good to think about, what you think is a red flag and what you think is just that person. You might completely disagree with me and go, yeah, Elliot, they're all the same. All those things you read out, they're all either red flags or green flags. I just don't think sometimes we use the red flag. Oh, that's a red flag. If someone's too small for you, you can't call it a red flag. Surely they can't help that. They can't do anything about it. It's something that is there all the time. I think, that's a question. Is a red flag something that someone can do something about? And is a characteristic something they can do nothing about, even if they wanted to? So I'm sure there are people of certain height that would like to be smaller or like to be taller, but they can't do anything about it. I think eating with your mouth open, on the other hand, you can do something about that. If you're rude, you can do something about that. But if that's in your characteristic and you're not, then that's what I would actually call, potentially a red flag in someone. So hopefully you enjoyed that and went through, and there were things in there that you straight away you went, yeah, not for me. And I don't mind that, not for me. So, if someone is really quiet, that could be great for people. I'm quite loud. Obviously, I'm told, and people have got to like that about me. Not necessarily when I go out. I'm not really loud when I go out. I'm just quite loud as a person. But if I'm with someone that's too quiet all of the time, I do find it exhausting having to maintain the conversation the whole time. And I've often do this when I've dated people. And in a couple of long-term relationships that I've had, where I've sat there and I thought, "Do you know what?" And it usually happens when you're driving. I thought, "I'm not going to say anything for 10 minutes and see what happens." And I found that when I didn't say anything for 10 minutes, nothing happened. There was no conversation, nothing at all. And that's fine. I think there needs to be a comfortable silence sometimes. But I've also had the impression of that thought, if I don't ever say anything, nothing is said at all. We won't discuss anything. We won't laugh about anything. I'm literally the one driving this all of the time. And that can be exhausting. It really can. The same with someone that's really shy. I quite like someone being inner confident. So they're very confident when they go out, but they're not overconfident. They're not always talking about themselves, and they're not, they don't need all the attention in the room. They might get the attention in the room, but that's not from craving it or demanding it or doing something that attracts it. It's from just their quiet confidence of being in a room and being comfortable within their own skin and being able to engage in different conversations, especially when you go to parties, having to take people places that you're constantly worried about is I used to find exhausting, and I'm quite flirty when I go out in terms of I'll be talking here, I'll be talking there, I'm going over there. And although I'll always, be respectful of the person that I'm with and keep an eye on them, I don't want to feel like I've got to babysit them the whole time. On the other hand, when I'm taken into new situations, I can be quite quiet and withdrawn until I'm comfortable. And then sometimes people are like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I think, "Yeah, I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm just being quiet and until I, can suss everyone out so I don't upset anyone with what I'm saying next." So we're moving on to the next question. And this is something that I've been considering lately. It is if you've got a friend that you have always been attracted to, and this goes back to the question last week, if guys are usually friends with women, not all of the time, but a lot of the time they'll will fancy him as well. So if you've got a friend that you fancy, at what stage do you think it's worth seeing if there's anything more there? Because sometimes you can be friends with people and you've got no interest in them. But other times when you have, you think that they may be interested in you, but you're not too sure. So what do you do about that? Because you get to that point of where you go, well, if I ask them out and they say no, it's going to be weird, isn't it? It's going to be uncomfortable after that because I'm going to feel embarrassed. Then maybe I'm not going to call them as much or talk to them as much, which is something I enjoy doing. And it's not about the rejection. It's about you've kind of got to gamble that friendship on whether or not it goes somewhere. And then there's the other thing of like, you know, we could date for a while. She could, have feelings that are reciprocated. It could last 2 or 3 months. We could be together that 2 or 3 months and then it doesn't work out. And then it's going to be weird because, it's going to be very difficult then backtracking and trying to find that friendship again straight away. I think you can do that when you get further down the line because, after breakups or, you decide to both go your own way, you kind of want a bit of distance from each other to start finding yourself again. So it takes a while to get over that so you can get to the next part where you go, it's okay now because I can look at you without fancying you, so I can be friends with you again. Because that's what I always find. If someone's not talking to you, it's probably because they're hurt and they've or hurt or angry at you. So they haven't got past that yet. Once they're past that, they can then be friends with you because they don't care about you anymore. So, if that's a lot easier to do once you're over that initial, okay, well, you've kind of pissed me off or, you hurt me. So I'm going to need to put you in the freezer for a while until I'm ready to get you out and de-thaw. And then, we can be friends again because I'm over you and, I've moved on somewhere else and doing something else. So I'm not worried about what happened with you because I couldn't care less now. So we can be friends again. So that's always the problem when you're wondering whether or not you should date friends. And I'm in that situation where I think, oh, I'd really like to take her out, and I think, it could be really good. But at the same time, we are good friends. So it may ruin that. And what's the gamble that you take? So that's always a good question. At what stage if you're friends with someone, do you think, we could date? That could be something because you're basing it, and everyone says, the best relationships are based upon friendships. They are until they go wrong. So I'll keep you updated on that one anyway, if at all you're interested. So the last question that we're coming to, and this is out of a lot of the questions and feedback we've had through the podcast, which you can always do, guys, through Instagram, through TikTok, or any of the YouTube stuff that are YouTube shorts, always email, contact, send messages. We'll get back to everyone, as soon as we can. It's about, do you ever know someone? And I have this all the time is, you always hear that, I know you better than you know yourself. And I always think, there's things that I do in my life that have surprised me. So I always think if you can do things that surprise yourself, what chance has anyone else got of really knowing you? Because we've all got things that we lock away, that we don't talk about. And we said last week about how, you share your number with people. And I was really surprised. I've never had a relationship where I've not been asked that by a woman. And, about how many people you've been intimate with. But I was really surprised last week about how many people said on the responses that, oh, well, I never ask people. And I was thinking, I've always been asked. But, we always have things that you lock away that you're either embarrassed about, ashamed of, or they're just memories that you don't want to think about again. You're not putting them away so you're not discussing with people. You're putting them away so they don't start roaming around your head again. And you've controlled that tiger, you've put it in a box and put it in a cage, and you don't want to let it out because once it comes out, it just brings up too many painful things, embarrassing things, things that you're not proud of, things that, you wish you wouldn't, wish you wouldn't have done, or things that have happened to you, you wish you weren't there in the first place. So when all this goes on, I don't think you can ever really know someone. I think you know someone based upon what they've shown you so far. And all you could do is go by that and think, right, I know what you've shown me. So, but I don't think everyone ever shows you everything. I really don't. I think you can always be surprised. And, I base this off a lot of people that have been in long-term relationships and at the end of it just say, turns out I didn't know him at all. Turns out I didn't know her at all. Whichever way it may be. So do you ever really know someone when someone doesn't ever really know themselves? I've always said the person that knows me best is me. And I think I can surprise myself sometimes by what I do. And that doesn't mean bad things. It can just be, things that I might say or things that I'll stand up for myself about or how I'll act in a certain situation. I think if you can surprise yourself, what chance has anyone else got of actually ever knowing you? What chance have we got? I think that could be the exciting thing as well, is that, if you're constantly striving to get to know someone, then surely that's a great thing. Surely there should be always things that you're finding out about someone or, things that surprise you about someone because that keeps the relationship fresh and that keeps the relationship moving forward. Because if you get to the point of standing still, are you not then going backwards, or are you not then becoming bored because nothing new is happening? And is that when certain things you may start to miss in the excitement or the surprise you might start finding in other areas every 7 years? And with every 7 years becomes 7 years of experience, and experiences change us. That means every 7 years someone's got to get to know us all over again. So in that time, they're constantly having to get to know people. If you're not constantly doing those things, you're stopping getting to know someone. And I remember speaking to Roger that was on the show with me, who'd been in a marriage and unfortunately lost his wife, but recently got engaged. So, made up for you guys, Janie and Roger, well done. But I remember he said that, there were times that they'd be really selfish with the kids where they just put them onto someone else, stopped. They always found that time for each other. I guess when you're dating and you've already got lives, that's a lot harder to do because you maybe can't combine your families yet, or you need to give your own kids time. So, that becomes a harder thing to do, but probably a necessity to do in order for you to constantly get to know that person. So I think if you approach it in a way that, think about this person is constantly changing. So I'm never going to know this person completely, but what I can do is stay up to date. It's a bit like refreshing your apps, I guess, on your phone, when there's updates and, the app's moved on and fixed bugs, fixes. It's like doing that, but you've got to do that in your relationship. And the only way of doing that
Tomorrow morning is knocking. Stock your fridge now. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or a sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
This episode is brought to you by Perfect Bistro Cat Food. Cats, this ad is for you. Has your human ever called you picky, persnickety, choosy? If so, Perfect Bistro Cat Food is for you. With ingredients like wild-caught tuna and pasture-raised lamb, tantalizing textures, and delectable flavors that meet even the most discerning cat standards. You're not picky, you're just perfectionists. Perfect Bistro, mealtime perfection for every cat. Have your human visit perfectbistro.com.
Is finding time, having arguments, maybe having disagreements, having those moments where you don't talk to each other because you're unsure about something. But what that does is it makes you aware that you care about this person, and they care about you, because, you're like, well, I'm annoyed at you because I didn't hear from you. And you kind of think, but that's kind of good though, right? That we're both thinking the same thing. So if you're worried about losing something all the time, you're also concerned with keeping it. So you're doing the right thing. So I guess when people say, do you ever know someone? I don't think you do. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think, if you've constantly got to work at getting to know someone, think about what you did in the beginning of a relationship, and judging on the question before about dating friends, you get to know a lot of that. But knowing someone as a friend and knowing someone in a romantic way is very different. How many times did you speak to people and go, Carl, your husband's a great guy, and the woman goes, yeah, you don't live with him. So you only ever know people to a certain degree. And that's a question that, we'll get to next week, I think, about, living with someone is completely different to knowing them, because you're spending a lot more time together. And that's probably why that when you go on holiday with someone, that could be the making or breaking sometimes of a relationship, because you're actually together for 2 weeks, 1 week, whatever it may be, finding out a bit about each other. So that brings us to the end of today's podcast. Guys, thank you once again, as always, for listening to 50 Shades and Grey. Make sure you subscribe, and make sure you follow us and comment, and follow us on TikTok and socials. It's davidson.elliott on Instagram, or 50 Shades and Grey, or one word. And on TikTok, it's 50 Shades and Grey. And we'll put clips up all the time, so you can follow us on the clips. But make sure you share and help us move forward. But take care. Enjoy your week. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
I'm Hannah. I've lost 75 pounds in 20 months with GLP-1s, plus diet and exercise. On Ro, I've gone from struggling to run a mile to running farther every day. You can access FDA-approved GLP-1s online. Get the support you need to reach your weight loss goals. Go to ro.co/weight to see if you qualify. I'm a paid Ro partner. 20% average weight loss in 1 year in non-diabetics with obesity or overweight with a weight-related medical condition versus 3.1% in placebo arm. RX only. To stay informed about serious side effects, go to ro.co/safety.